Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into another episode of the Money Insights Podcast. My name is Christian Allen. I'm here with my regular co-host. You know him as Rod the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I am doing great.
Okay, we also have two additional co-hosts. Most of you will know these guys as well. We've got Blake the Snake Brogan and Brenyn McConnell. What's up, guys?
Shopping.
Yeah. Thanks for being on with us, you guys. Excited to have you. You guys are going to bring a huge amount of value because today in our podcast, we're going to be talking about the money habits of the ultra wealthy, or just like the wealthy, the successful clients that we see. And I realize that money isn't the only measurement of success. So we are going to say our most successful clients, right? What are the habits, the mindset that we've been able to learn, the things we're learning from our most successful clients? And we just felt like everybody's constantly asking these questions. So it just makes sense to put it out there into the world. Before we get going, do we have any announcements, Rod, that we need to throw out there? We have a live webinar with Lisa Chastain on the 21st. Is that right?
That's right.
Yep. So if assuming this is before the 21st, make sure you catch our live webinar with Lisa Chastain. This is a good one, and it connects directly with this pod because the stuff she's talking about is the money mindset needed to like create and execute the plan to build generational wealth. So I think making sure that you're on that webinar with Lisa will be a really powerful thing. Okay, today we're just gonna act as if it's kind of like an interview, except instead of having one interviewee, I've got three interviewees. Okay, now I want to just preface this by saying this is not like your typical interview. Like, I want you guys to all pipe in with ideas, thoughts. I don't care if it's not a question to you. Just chime in. Give us your best stuff, okay? The whole goal here is to make sure that we give the people listening the best material that we can possibly give them. Does that sound good? Are you guys up for it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. All right, we're going to start out with mindset and decision-making. Rod, this question, we're kicking it off with you, my friend. How are your wealthiest clients approaching decision-making differently from those who are still kind of in their earlier wealth-building journey?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I come at it from two angles. The first one is from the standpoint of education. I think the people that we tend to work with are continually out there learning about new things, learning about different opportunities, different types of opportunities, and ways that they can plug that into what they currently have to continue growing their wealth. So that's one piece I think that is critical.
So it's like a mindset, you're saying a mindset of just continually learning, of continual progression.
Yes. And it's great because we obviously benefit from that because we are putting content out there. People are seeing our content, and that's often how they find us. But they're also out there seeing a whole bunch of other things. And so they bring really cool perspectives to our conversations. And so when we're plugging in and saying, okay, so for example, the investment optimizer, how can we help you enhance the investing that you're doing? Well, they always have really cool things that they're already doing, different ways of thinking and approaching their decision making, so that it plugs in really, really nicely, and just we can see why they're really have been successful on this path to building wealth.
Love it.
Okay. So that's the first one.
Okay.
Then the second piece is they tend to, and it's probably because of number one, because they come to the table with knowledge, with having, being a really well thought out approach, that they are pretty quick to make decisions. So they take in the information, they decide, hey, is this worth me spending my time and ultimately eventually my money to engage with this strategy, opportunity, whatever it is. But they're making decisions relatively quickly. And again, I'm specifically saying this about people who are further down the line. They probably didn't always have that ability to make decisions quite as quickly, but because they do that, that allows them to move from one thing to the next. And it's not that they're not making mistakes, because they are, but they're learning from those mistakes, and that helps them on that journey so that they they can kind of move through it in a relatively quick pace.
Okay, so my experience on this is that like taking forever to make a decision ends up oftentimes hurting us more than helping us, right?
Yep.
So like it's not that we want to be frivolous with our decisions. It's not that we don't want to have great due diligence. All of those things are super important. And yet what we typically find is that the most successful people are able to obtain that information and ascertain quickly whether it's something that could be of benefit to them and their world, and then make a decision and run with it. And to your point, decisions or bad decisions can get made occasionally, but for the most part, it just ends up working better as a whole. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Everyone agree with that? Okay. I love it. So making decisions quickly, always having a mindset of learning is super critical. This next question is for you, Brenyn. And my question is this: how do your most successful clients typically handle like their spending habits, their budgeting? Are they operating the same or differently from people who are maybe earlier on? And I don't want to say people who don't have money, but people who are earlier on in their wealth building journey.
Yeah, I think of one of our clients in particular that has an Excel spreadsheet that has all of this listed out. And the reason I think of him is because it's fairly common for somebody that we're working with to have that kind of Excel spreadsheet. They're pretty organized in their spending and budgeting. And it's not so much, that they're budgeting to save. It's more so that they want to know exactly what their living expenses are. So, X amount of their income, let's say it's $200,000, that much of their income is for living expenses. That's for vacations and family and kids sports and all that kind of stuff. And then everything else is to build wealth. And they keep it in that spreadsheet. From, what I've learned from them is they like keeping it in there because they also don't want their spending to go crazy and to get out of hand. They want to keep their spending where they feel comfortable, and they want to continue to compound and build their wealth, which all of that is going to be tracked in the spreadsheet. So they've got their budgeting, their spending, and then they've got all of their investments listed out and organized. And that's, I think, what I've seen. Most of our successful clients will have some form of that kind of organization.
Yeah, I like that. I think about myself, right? And I live in like some sort of hybrid world from what you just described. Like at a high level, I'm very organized and I know how much I'm saving, how much I'm spending, how much is going to business, all those different elements. And yet I'm probably not as organized as some people. And I can tell you from experience that I would be much better off if I was more organized. But I am the anomaly in this. That's why I have to like work with people like Rod who can help make sure that I get organized as well. And so even if you're not that person that's like, I'm going to drill down and make budgets and spreadsheets, you don't have to be that person in order to be organized and in order to be thoughtful and know what you're doing. But there does have to be an element of knowing the score, right? If I don't know the score, I can't make sure that I'm winning the game. And so like part of what I'm hearing you say, Brenyn, is that they're organized and they know the score so that they can make decisions that will help them continue to win the game. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more income that somebody makes or the more cash flow that somebody has coming in, the less detailed they have to be on their spending and budgeting. It's just knowing the ballpark of where they are that helps them kind of figure all the rest of it out.
Yeah, there's just more margin, right? The more income that I have, there's more margin that doesn't have to isn't necessarily quite as important. Okay, I love it. I think that's a really great answer. This next question is going to you, Blake. The question is this: how do your most successful clients diversify their portfolios? Is there a pattern in how they balance between? We always talk about the difference between alternative and traditional. What does that look like in your most successful clients' worlds?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of times I'll jump on a call with someone, and as they start to describe their situation, they'll talk about, the traditional assets that they have. And a lot of times I think that they're telling me those, and then they'll have some statement like, hey, I know you guys don't really maybe work with people who have traditional assets.
They're like sheepish about telling us about their 401ks and IRAs, right?
Yeah, for sure. And their Roths and all that stuff. And I just throw that out there because it's funny to me, because I would say probably 90 to 95% of the people that I talk to have money in the market in some capacity, right? We do have a few maybe a handful of people I've talked to who are like, I just don't
no.
like that at all. Yeah, that's just not for me, or whatever the case may be. So I think in terms of kind of the difference in terms of income level and starting to build wealth, it does often just start with the traditional side. Like as you start to get working, it's very easy just to plug into the 401ks, the IRAs, or whatever your employer's sponsoring. You just kind of get building that way. And then really I see in that as your income grows, okay, we've got these buckets, they're doing okay. I may like them, I may not like them, but that's where we really start to shift over to the alternative side. So even though you might have the mindset of, hey, I want to be in these alternative investments, and I see the benefits from the taxation, from the appreciation, depreciation, the cash flow I can generate from these versus the traditional side. We certainly have nearly everyone, as I mentioned, in both camps, but certainly as your income goes up, just from my experience in talking with people, that shift becomes more and more towards the alternative side. So, if you're making 7 figures, you might be putting a little bit into the traditional stuff, but more, certainly more of that starting to go into the alternative space.
Can I throw a thought out there as well? Because I often think of it in terms of the difference between a business owner versus an employee at W-2 earner, because the business owner will tend to be more towards the alternative just because that their business, the bulk of their wealth is going to be in their business. And so in some cases, they're actually seeking out maybe some more on the traditional side to balance it, or just because that's, as business owners, they can do a 401k, they can do a SEP IRA or whatever, things that a W-2 earner can't do on their own. So anyway, whereas on the employee side, they're taking advantage of those opportunities, especially if there's a match on the 401k or things like that, especially like to your point, Blake, as a starting point, and then kind of what you said about as it gets bigger, adding more of the alternative.
Well, and there's not a wrong answer, right? Like we do certainly see there's usually a catalyst that comes into play that makes people move from traditional to alternative. Oftentimes it's taxes, right? It's like, gosh, I'm starting to do better. I'm excited about that, but my tax bill is getting big and it's becoming a higher percentage of my overall income. What can I do to change that? Well, the nice thing about the alternative space is that a lot of that stuff kind of has these built-in tax benefits to it. And so people start to realize that there's other places that they can go and learn about things like taxes. And then they start to see like, oh, there's, sometimes it might be that I can get a better risk-adjusted return out here. But here's my broader point. There's not a wrong answer here. The goal is really to take the best of both worlds, depending on the person and the situation, and make it work, right? Like the best situation is the one that works for the person before anything else. Okay, here we go. This next question, Rod, is for you. And we're going to talk about, this is perfect. We were just talking about taxes. We're going to talk about taxes and estate planning. How proactive are your most successful clients about tax strategies? Let's start with that.
Yeah, they are the more they earn, the more proactive they want to be. In other words, there's always this like shock factor. People get to that level and they're like, man, I have made it to the promised land. I'm a high income now. And then they get the tax bill and there's this shock of like, oh no, what have I done? Right.
Usually it's like, where do I come up with the money to pay the tax bill now?
Yes. And then immediately they become a tax strategy nut because they never want to pay that much in tax again. And they want to do everything they can from a proactive standpoint in organizing, again, whether it be inside of their business or even if they're a W-2 earner, the way that they invest, the things that they're investing in to create these tax savings so that they never have to do that again.
Yeah. We always talk about how the tax code is a massive list of incentives that we have an opportunity to like take advantage of. And obviously not everything is but a lot of it is incentive based, right?
Yep.
So what ends up happening, to your point, is my income increases. I have more excess cash flow. Now I'm thinking, well, I could just invest this in the market and get a return. And that's good. Like that's powerful. But I also could invest it in, let's say, a piece of real estate, get a similar type of return, maybe better even, with less risk. And I can get some like massive tax savings in the interim. And so suddenly that shift becomes like more important, right? Taxes end up being really big and important. And I would say I think about one of the differentiators between our most successful clients and the ones who are trying to get there is that the most successful ones are actually proactive in tax strategy. The ones who are not are what they want to be proactive in tax strategy, but actually are struggling to get there. Now, let me just clarify on that. Like, it's hard to do. So I'm not just throwing it out there like, hey, people aren't trying. I think the biggest issue is oftentimes people don't know where to go, who to talk to find the kind of tax strategy that matches that. But again, our most successful clients are without question doing a good job of reducing their taxes through whatever avenues that are legal and on the white side of the line as possible. Does that everyone
Absolutely.
agree with that?
Yep. And aligning themselves with the people that can help them do that. And sometimes it's an individual, if they get really fortunate and find the CPA that has all that knowledge and the tips and tricks, then great. But often it ends up being spread across multiple people because they have their CPA, but they might have others out there that are helping them learn about and take advantage of those opportunities.
Hey, Brenyn, what does continuous learning and mentorship play for what role does that play for the most successful clients that you work with?
Yeah, I think it's pretty huge. And I'd love to hear from Rod and Blake on this one too, because I'm sure they have some really great stories of different clients. But on my side of it, I feel like, almost all of them are going to be continuously learning. And the way that they do that is going to different meetups, investor meetups. They attend different online webinars. There's a ton of material online, and then there's a bunch of different events that people can go to. And what's funny is I feel like we see a lot of our clients at a lot of those events all the time. And I'll see them in Ohio, and then I'll see them in Las Vegas, and then I'll see them in Florida. And it's fun. But that's kind of typical of our clients, is that they're always looking at different investment opportunities. They're looking at different ways to invest and different ways to have great tax strategies. And so they attend those events often. On the mentorship side of things, I feel like that one can be really involved or not so involved. And what I mean by that is some people have a mentor to help get them started in their wealth building journey, and then either outgrow that mentor or, it's not really a long-term relationship with that mentor. Whereas others will have a mentor that they stick with for 15, 20, 25 years that will help them every step of the way. And I think the key part there is, as long as that mentor continues to be more successful than the mentee, I think they'll continue to learn from the mentor. But as soon as that person that's learning from the mentor kind of surpasses that person, it's not that they're not going to have a relationship anymore, but they kind of turn into the expert, right? The Padawan has become the master. And so that's what I feel like we see with mentorship, at least on a lot of the clients that I work with.
Yeah, that's powerful. I feel like having a mentor when it doesn't have to be personal. It could be multiple people, right? It doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, I have this, very specific relationship with XYZ person. I think about my own career, and there's several people that I would look at and say like, hey, that person acted as a mentor for me. And yet I don't think I have any one person that I would say like, God, I just stuck with them. They stuck with me the whole way. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that's a good point. But I also would say that like finding somebody that you can look to at that next, that's beyond where you're at, is just always a powerful and important thing. If you're wanting to continue to grow and achieve, it helps provide some inspiration, some guidance. And ultimately, those are people who have done a lot of the things you're wanting to do. Most of us aren't trying to recreate the wheel when it comes to building wealth, right? So if that's the case, like, let's learn from the people who have done a really good job with it. That's my thought. Okay, next I want to talk about managing wealth in conjunction with family. Blake, here's my question. Do you see any specific or particular strategies or tools that people are using when it comes to trying to create generational wealth or spread that out into to next generations? What kind of stuff are you seeing out there from the successful clients you have?
Well, you're certainly teeing me up for this, because for anyone who knows or listens to our podcast, our strategies involve life insurance. And then obviously there's a generational wealth transfer that's going to take place at some point when you pass away. So I think we're on kind of the front row of these conversations in terms of people getting, wealthy people setting up these strategies. And certainly, let's talk about the investment optimizer. When people are setting this up, they love the cash value and being able to leverage that into other investments and enhance their returns, right? The things we talk about all the time. However, as they get older, they start to see the value of the permanent death benefit. Oftentimes it's 7 figures or even 8 figures, a permanent death benefit that's going to pass away to the next generation. So for example, we have a client, I think he's in his 60s, friend of the pod, but he's now setting these up for the third generation. So, he's taken a look at what he has set up for him and his wife. He's got a handful of kids. He has policy set up on all of them. And in our conversations with them, he's like, okay, when this transfer takes place, here's what we're going to be able to do on that generation. And not only on that generation now, but they've started to have children as well. So now he's got the third generation set up with these policies as well. So they're starting small on the younger generations. And of course, he's got a lot of things that he has going in terms of investments, but the investment optimizer strategies are a huge component to setting this up for multiple generations. And it's just really cool when you look at the numbers and kind of how there's that exponential growth as each generation passes away. I think that's, something only been in the business for about 10 years or so. We haven't seen the fruit of that yet, but I'm excited, as our careers keep going to be able to kind of see the benefits of the strategies that people set up.
So there's 2 assets that I think, when I think of like passing money on to the next generation, that are really powerful: life insurance and real estate. There's probably some others that fit in there too, but like those are huge, right? Because we're getting like so much value across the board. And it feels to me like utilizing the investment optimizer strategy in conjunction with your investing just naturally goes right in conjunction with this idea of, creating generational wealth and trying to move to the next generation. All of those things really end up being important, and they just kind of work fluidly within it, regardless of whether it's the investment optimizer, whether we're talking capital avalanche. They just kind of mesh together. They just mesh.
Our most successful clients that I see, they're building a culture of this. And it goes into what you were just talking about, Blake, what you talked about earlier, Brenyn. They have systems, they have processes, they have organization in place, and it makes it really easy to build that culture and teach their children. And so then with that in place now, with the example you gave, Blake, when the torch gets passed to the next generation, they know what to do with it, right? It's all just been part of the system and what they've been doing for so long. And so as you're setting up trust and you're doing all these different organization or structural things to pass on and make this generational wealth, you're also passing that culture and that mindset as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. Okay, Rod, here's a question for you. What motivates your clients? Just period. What is motivating your most successful clients?
I think it goes in stages, because initially they get to the point where they are, and especially with the kind of the high income type of person, because they're motivated to provide for their family, to have a certain lifestyle that they want to live, travel, whatever that might be. And then using like what I talked about earlier, then all of a sudden taxes come into play, and they're like, oh man, I don't want to have to pay taxes anymore. Now that becomes a motivating factor for them to learn more and do certain things to avoid having to pay so much in taxes, which ultimately it's not just the avoiding of the taxes, that's an opportunity cost. To the extent that I pay that money to the government, that's money I don't have to continue building my wealth. So to the extent I can keep that money in my hands, I can build it more quickly and to a much larger extent. So, and then as they age, and especially when grandkids come into play, then it becomes more of maybe like legacy. So we just talked about this whole idea of generational wealth, thinking more beyond just the here and now, and or even just providing for their kids, but oh man, this perpetuates on down the line. How can I make this continue to work out? And so that motivates them.
So when I think about what motivates the most successful people I've worked with. Like there is a lot of those things, and it certainly goes in stages. But like one of the things that comes to my mind is that oftentimes it's that they want to do something of significance, right? Like, and now that doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, they need everybody to gawk at what they've done, but they need to feel like they've done something significant, whether that's, helping their children and grandchildren go to college. It doesn't matter. Like necessarily, it could be giving to like some philanthropic cause that they really care about. But at some level, it's like it usually comes down to things that they feel like that real conviction on. And like you said, Rod, I totally agree that it starts out one way and just evolves depending on the stage of life. And usually it ends up in, hey, how do I get my wealth to the next generation so that it can create as much value to my family, to the charity, to the people that I'm giving it to as possible.
Agreed.
Okay, avoiding common pitfalls, Brenyn, what common pitfalls do you see with your wealthiest clients? And then maybe just like, how do you see people avoiding some of those pitfalls?
Yeah, this is one where I guess the first pitfall that I would bring up would be lifestyle creep. And we work with a lot of physicians and dentists. And so I've heard a lot about this, and I feel like it's most common with them. But it's a little bit more like dramatic with them because they go through all of this schooling. They're living off student loans. They're living in a little apartment. They're not spending much money on food and going out. And then all of a sudden they start making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And they're like, it's time to live, right? Like I've sacrificed all of my, the last 12 years of my life in higher education to get to this point, and like I need to live now, right? And I think what's hard for them too is they see other people in careers that maybe have been making not necessarily 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, but they've been making 150,000, 200,000, and they have a really nice house and maybe a boat and right some of the things that you may want, and so it's really hard for them to not just go crazy the first couple of years. And once you do that for a year or two, then it does become a lifestyle, right? And then it gets really hard to kind of scale that back. So I think the most successful physicians and dentists that we've seen have been able to transition from school to working life without kind of dramatically using their income as lifestyle, meaning, that they're very deliberate at setting aside 20, 30, 40% of their income to go out and create more wealth. And I think that comes from just the mindset of saying, hey, if I don't do this now, then when I'm 60, 65 years old, I may have to continue working, right? And it's not because I want to, it's because I've got to work to keep up with my lifestyle. So, lifestyle creep is a big one. And then the second one that I feel like, the major pitfall of some of our clients would just be not diversifying their assets enough. And I'm even just talking about with alternative assets, not necessarily with traditional and alternative, although that can be a great strategy. But specifically with alternative assets, I think of one of our clients that Rod and I work with really closely, who happens to also have one of those Excel spreadsheets that we're talking about, listing out all of their assets and their investments. What's really cool about him is he has assets, I'll just throw out a couple, and he may or may not have these, but this is very similar to his situation where he's got multifamily, syndication investments. He might have some self-storage investments. He might have single family properties, and he's also got cryptocurrencies. Right. So there's all these different kinds of assets in the alternative asset space where, if some of his assets are underperforming, the other ones may be outperforming or doing exactly what he wants. The people that are just one dimensional and they get into, let's say, multifamily real estate, and they just keep investing all of their dollars into that. That's where that's where we see some pain points, where if some of those assets start not performing, that can be painful for somebody. Whereas if somebody's well diversified, yes, it's still painful, but it's a lot less painful.
Yeah, I think that's true. So it feels like diversification is one of those just buzzwords that you say, hey, everybody should do this. And yet it can be a lot harder than you might think to diversify, especially when you have assets or investments that are performing well, right? It's so easy to just be like, I can just dump it back in. I can keep dumping money into the thing that's doing well. And that works great up until the moment that the thing that's been doing well is no longer doing well, right? Let's get to Blake. You're next. Blake, you're going to sum it up for us with a bow, right? So we'll probably put this into two parts. This is obviously part one. And I'm excited because Blake is going to take everything that we've talked about from this point, and he's just going to sum it up in a nice bow, wrap it up. Blake, here's the question. If you had to sum it up, what are the biggest difference between our most successful clients and the ones who aren't?
We've hit on a lot of them. As you said, my summary, though, would be the most successful ones that we have are really quarterbacking their own financial journey. So, you think about just, if you're just a typical person, a lot of times you kind of turn your money over to a financial planner of some sort. Here's my things. You just go ahead and grow the money for me. Let me know what I can spend and how much cash flow I'm going to have in retirement or XYZ. The people that we work with tend to be, they certainly have financial professionals, tax advisors, insurance people, attorneys, whatever that they may use, but they're the ones really quarterbacking their own journey. So they haven't really just turned it over to anyone in particular. Yes, I'm going to use all these different professionals in certain areas wherever it makes sense, but I want to be the one kind of controlling, when am I going to do this? How much liquidity am I going to keep? When am I going to jump on opportunities? When am I going to hold back on opportunities? Things like that, I think really kind of sum it up.
Well, and in order to be that kind of person, you have to be educated. You have to know the material, right? And so it's like a two-phase process. It's like the first part of it is the successful clients are always learning, they're understanding their financial dynamics, and then taking it to that next step. They're not just putting it off to someone else and saying, "Hey, go build wealth for me." They are very deliberate about it. I absolutely think that's true. That's one of the characteristics that we see as people make that shift from traditional to alternative. They start to see like, hey, there's more control here than what I've had over here. I don't have to be just in business with the government for the rest of my lifetime. I can do things that create like genuine tax savings. So I think that's really good advice, probably as good as it comes. So we're going to finish on that note. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us today. This is part one of the money habits of the ultra wealthy. Make sure you tune in for part two coming out in the next couple weeks.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth-building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.